Welcome, everybody. We've got a few people on the line here, so to speak, already, and more people jumping in right now. So we'll give ourselves a minute or two before we dive in. A lot of people signing in still. I'm Jeff Stewart, one of our winemakers, general manager here at Hartford Family Winery, and thank you all for joining us on this day out here in California. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about our current state of affairs as we get into this. But thanks again for everybody joining in today. It should be a fun conversation. I think we have everybody on mute right now to open up, but feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question. And jump in or jump into the chat box and ask any questions while I'm rambling on. I tend to ramble a lot, so you'll have to break my rambling every now and then to get a word in. But this is really all about really answering questions you guys have, telling you a little bit about one of our vineyards, a couple of the wines that we're kind of focusing on today. I'm hoping a lot of you have either had our Far Coast Chardonnay and Pinot Noir before, or have them in front of you. I know I have both of them. I will admit it's been a long day here, and I'm ready for 2 glasses of wine. So, anyways, I think we, what do we got? 4:01. I think we'll probably get going. All you guys that were on time, you get a reward. We're not going to wait for everyone else, but we'll jump right in. So. If you missed it, I'm Jeff Stewart, winemaker, director of winemaking here, along with Tion Lorden, who is another one of our winemakers. He's not sitting in because he's actually out running the cellar right now and dealing with real winemaking things because we started harvest today. So pretty fun stuff here. We also have Becky Craig, who is our estate manager here and manages all of our both our tasting rooms at the winery here and in Healdsburg and hospitality and all that. Tani Shiner is on as well, who runs our wine club. I think hopefully a lot of you have met both of them. And also Paul Lovato, who also works helping out with the wine club and does a lot of outreach to people. So they're online as well, so they can answer some questions like things about wine clubs and things that I, as a winemaker, just don't understand. So anyways, I think probably most people know that we are in the middle of a very crazy time here in Sonoma County again. So I'll just kind of touch on that real quickly. We're sitting here today in Forestville at our winery, which is as near as I can tell about 6 miles away, maybe 7 miles from a fire that has been going for about a day and a half now, started by lightning, and it's grown. Last count I heard was over 1,500 acres. I'm guessing it's much more than that by now, and it's just to the northwest of us, and pretty frightening. We've been through fires here in 2017 that didn't get close to us. Last year, 2018, another big fire that potentially could have jumped Highway 101 and got down our way, and thankfully it didn't. And this one is really just too close for comfort. So we literally were here till 10:30 last night, laying out fire lines and big sprinklers to protect the land around the winery and sprinkle the winery. So if worse came to worse and a forest fire came our way, we might be able to survive it. So we made it through the night. Brought in our first grapes this morning at 6 o'clock and had those grapes pressed out and in the tank by about 8. So we kind of beat the rush there. But the fire is definitely on everyone's mind. We have a huge fire over in Napa as well and a lot of other small fires around. So not to be negative, but I'm sure a lot of you have questions and wonder how we're doing. We're in a zone right here that is, we're on an evacuation warning right now where we sit. And I think probably by the end of the day, we will be under a mandatory evacuation. So somehow I'm amazingly calm through all this, considering hell's breaking loose, but we're going to have fun and taste some wine. So please ask questions about the fire and that as we get into this, but I'm sure everybody is kind of, at least it's hurt a little bit, and it is very serious, and it's really warm here. Thankfully, the wind isn't blowing too hard, and that's our saving grace. But we will overcome this as we do everything else that Mother Nature throws at us. So anyways, let's talk about wine. It's much more fun. The two wines we really wanted to talk about today, and we were focusing on, are I don't know, it's hard to say that I have favorites, but when you look at our lineup of wines, and we, for those of you that don't know us very well at Hartford Family Winery, we make a lot of different single vineyard wines. We bottled over 40 different wines last year. 35 of those are single vineyard bottlings of either Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Old Vine Zinfandel. We make a Syrah, we make a Rosé, but we really love the idea and have from the beginning of taking these little individual vineyard sites that have, as Don Hartford likes to say, high personality. And you can call high personality terroir, you can call it the taste of a place, you can call it a unique flavor, you can call it whatever you want. For us, it's just really important to find vineyard sites that really have something that is unique and distinct. And we started out in '94 making 3 wines, 3 single vineyard wines, 2 Pinot Noirs and an Old Vine Zinfandel. As we have expanded our vineyard holdings, planted more vineyards, that's grown, as I said, probably 35 different single vineyards. So that is the heart and soul of what Hartford is all about. Those bottlings are all fairly small. I mean, to give you an idea, I'm going to cheat and look at the back label here. The Far Coast Chardonnay 2017 we're talking about today was 326 cases. So that's a fairly good size single vineyard for us. A lot of the wines are only 150, 200 cases. So very limited production. Again, kind of getting the best out of every one of these little ranches. The Pinot Noir, we did 293 cases in 2017. So that gives you an idea of kind of how big these are. And what I'm going to do is pop up a map and kind of give you a sense of where Far Coast is and talk a little bit about the things that make these wines really special to us, and the things that kind of we think drive the character and the flavors and aromatics and all the good stuff that make these unique and distinct. So, any questions before we dive into that? I think I introduced everybody. I think I said which winery we are, right? Any other thoughts, or we'll dive into it?
Dive in.
Okay, we'll do it. I'm going to share my screen and just pop up a little overview on Google Earth. Let's see. All righty. Can everybody see kind of what we're looking at there?
Yep.
Great. So I'm going to zoom out here to give you a kind of sense of where we are. Oh, there's the U.S. We're going to zoom in. So here's California. Let me come out a little bit. Sorry, I won't give you all the headache, but we kind of have California here, San Francisco Bay right here, obviously Los Angeles way down here. We'll zoom in a little bit. So again, San Francisco Bay here. Coming up into this little green line right here is the Sonoma-Marin County line. So anything north of that and inside this green line is Sonoma County. So that's our home, and more specifically, the Russian River Valley. So the Russian River is this little area, kind of where a big concentration of vineyard names are, obviously. But Jennifer's Vineyard is the most southern vineyard. It literally is the edge of the Russian River AVA. So the AVA sort of does this circle. It goes up. It kind of comes right out here. It goes all the way up to the southern part of Healdsburg and kind of back down here. So it's kind of a big circle here. And then we have the Green Valley AVA, which is this little circle right here. So those are our two kind of home AVAs. The winery itself, where I'm sitting, is right here. That's the northern end of the Green Valley AVA, and this is really what we consider the heart of the Russian River right here. The vineyard we're going to talk about today is way up here out on the coast, and it's called Far Coast. And we also make Pinot or Syrah there that we call Outer Limits. So this is Highway 1, the Sonoma Coast here. If any of you have been up there, it's just one of the most beautiful coastlines in the world. But it's not a California beach. It's not sandy beaches with lifeguards in bikinis and all that. It is rugged, it is cold, it is great white sharks. It's 55 degrees, and if you surf out there, you're wearing a wetsuit and a hoodie, and it's a very different thing than a Southern California beach. But that's part of what drives the quality and the style of these wines. I talked about the fire going on. To give you a sense of where that is, here's the town of Guerneville right here. If any of you have been to Armstrong Woods, Redwood Forest, it's right there. The winery is right here. Currently, the fire basically is right in this is the southern part of the fire. And it literally is kind of bouncing up along here, and it almost reaches up to a place called Lake Sonoma. It's just hopped over this ridge here, and there's a couple spot fires right here. So imagine all of this, not all of it, but there's a few pockets that aren't burning, but a big chunk of this is right now on fire. Not so great. This vineyard is away from that, but currently, literally this entire area right here has been evacuated. So everybody has been asked to leave for their own safety and get out of there. This is a really remote area. It's only about 30 miles from the winery to the vineyard, Far Coast, as the crow flies, but it takes you about an hour and 40 minutes to drive it, because you either have to go all the way up here to Lake Sonoma, end up on a logging road, and go here, or go all the way out to the coast and up this windy road, and then again up a little one-lane logging road to get there. So that's a little geography. And why is that important? Well, number one, why do we grow Chardonnay and Pinot Noir in the Russian River? And why do they grow Cabernet up in Alexander Valley here? Well, this ocean is the key to it. So proximity to the ocean drives a lot of factors. It's cooler in the Russian River because of the fog coming in through a little gap in these coastal ridges right here. So that's why we can grow Chardonnay and Pinot Noir really effectively here. The same thing happens on the coast. You're basically right in this big refrigerator's path, and we're able to kind of take advantage of that in different ways depending on our vineyard site. Our two Sonoma Coast vineyards really are Far Coast and Seascape. And they're both about 4 miles from the ocean. They sit between 600 and 1,000 foot elevation. So they sound kind of similar. Well, there are differences. Seascape is on the first coastal ridge. So when you sit at Seascape here, you're literally looking down from here at Bodega Bay, which is down here, and Tamales Bay all the way down here. So you're getting the full brunt of cold air coming in and hitting this vineyard. We're going to go up to Far Coast now. And when you look at these areas, you basically have a coastal ridge right here, and then a little valley, and then you have the next coastal ridge that comes up. So we're on the second ridge. So we're a little bit protected when the fog and cold air comes in. It's still very cool. It's still very, very much a place that you want to grow cool climate varietals. So Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, and most of our vineyard up here is planted to Pinot Noir. So that's a little kind of geography lesson on what we're doing. And as we zoom in on this vineyard, you can see it's a pretty substantial little spot here. And we make our Chardonnay Far Coast, our Pinot Noir Far Coast here. And we also make another wine that's a blend of Far Coast and Seascape together called Land's Edge. And that's a Sonoma Coast blend. So this vineyard supplies a lot of fruit to us, and it really is an amazing site. It is very desolate up here. You literally, there's a little town called Annapolis right up at the top of the hill here, and they have a post office, and that's about it. There's Annapolis. I think the population is like 35 people, so that gives you a sense of how this area is populated. But an amazing, amazing place. You're surrounded here by old growth redwoods. The vineyards literally back up to these old redwood trees. And we purchased this property back in 96 or 95. Got to get a little water there. In 95, and this was actually an apple orchard. So most of all this land was cleared, and it was a functional apple orchard. In fact, I'm going to zoom in here. As you look right here, this is an old stone apple dryer right in the middle of the vineyard. So we took this beautiful rolling hills, again, between 600 and about 900 foot elevation here, depending on where you're at. And took out what was left of the apple trees that were really in decline and developed this into an amazing vineyard site. We have a pond up there that allowed us to get the vines planted and irrigated by capturing sheet flow off rainfall out here and filling that pond from there. So we don't have any wells or anything out there. And it's a little over 100 acres of vineyard, but the whole property is about 350 or 400 acres. So again, one of our big things is when we have a vineyard in a place like this, we want to maintain the land around the vineyard and maintain the ecosystem that's there. It's not about just putting and maximizing your vineyard property. If you have 100 acres, you want 99 acres of vineyard. That doesn't work for us. There are deer and wild boar out here, and it's just one of the most interesting places. I love it out there. And wish we could drive you all up there, but this is our virtual tour. So really a fun place. So enough about the vineyard. What about the wine? I saw a few of you taking sips of Chardonnay, so I hope you're diving into the Far Coast Chardonnay. And it is actually planted on a little block right up here. So all of our Chardonnay actually is right in this little section. So most of this is Pinot Noir with a little bit of Syrah. But that little hillside starts down low here, goes up to a ridge top. That's a pretty good. Then there's a ridge in the middle. This is a nice little hike. I come in here, drive up here, park my car, and literally start going back and forth, tasting the grapes, looking at the vineyard. And by the time you get to the top, you've gotten your steps in for the day and a pretty good workout. So a nice little vertical climb, which means very well-drained soils. You can see it's pretty even here. You don't see vines that are, see a couple weak spots here, but really a pretty consistent vineyard. So what's so special about Chardonnay and this site in particular? Why does it make a wine like this? Well, when you smell it, there's a lot of fruit, and we love fruit in our wines. We love, California is really good at making wines that have fruit intensity, but the best wines for me are always wines that have fruit, but they also have all the secondary and tertiary characters that come with what I would consider world-class wines. For Chardonnay, that can be spice. In the case of this wine, the fruit component for me is almost more like yellow quince. It's not traditional apple or anything like that, but there's a citrus note to it as well. And then there's, the dreaded word that we all use and don't really like, and it's really hard to define, but there's a minerality. There's sort of this wet stone sort of character to this wine. And I think that comes through even more in the mouth. But really beautiful, intense wine with the fruit and those layers of spice, exotic fruit. There's almost a little bit of a floral kind of candied hint to the wine. All of our Chardonnays are barrel fermented, but I think when you smell this, you probably don't see a lot of wood, and that's intentional. We don't like to farm beautiful places like this that make intensely flavored wines and hide them behind a bunch of oak. It would be like, taking a freshly caught fillet of salmon from Bodega Bay, 20 minutes from here, you get it off the boat. That afternoon, you bring it home, and you put so much salt and paprika on it that you can't taste the fish anymore. It's very similar with winemaking. Barrels are an amazing spice. If you use salt correctly on a piece of salmon or a great ribeye, it brings flavor out. Barrels can help bring flavor out in wine the same way. So we want to use the barrel as a container, a vessel to ferment in, because they're really great for fermentation, for the temperature and everything like that. But you also get a little bit of the wood character sort of helping to balance and build up the wine. And that's really important with this wine as well. And when you taste the wine, for me, this is a wine that has a lot of structure, and we don't talk about structure that often with Chardonnay, with white wines. We do with red wines. Think of tannins. Pinot Noir has some tannin. Cabernet has a lot of tannin. Well, this is a Chardonnay that has some tannin. It has some grippiness to it. And one of the things I love about the wine, it has acid, but it has that kind of structural piece. We've done things where if you can buy glasses that are completely black so you can't see the wine. And I've poured this wine for people, and they're convinced it's Pinot Noir. So it can be very tricky, believe it or not. You'd think that would be a very easy thing to tell if a wine is white or red, but it's actually quite hard, especially when you have a lot of structure and character like this. But why does this wine have more of that character than, say, maybe a vineyard down in the Russian River? Well, it's the same soil type here as we have in a lot of our Russian River vineyards. It's called Gold Ridge, and believe it or not, this little 700-foot ridge right here 12, 15 million years ago was part of the ocean bottom. So the ocean out here used to actually cover all this. All these ridges were uplifted with volcanic activity and tectonic activity over the last 10 million years. So this used to be all ocean bottom, and the same with the Gold Ridge in the Russian River Valley. And it's old decomposed sandstone. It is volcanic ash that, as those volcanoes blew up, they literally spewed ash up in the air, and it settled back in the ocean and settled down to these bottoms. And then when you walk through, you actually kick the soil and you dig and plant a vine, and you might find seashells. It's the craziest thing. You're standing in a vineyard looking at a 2,000-year-old redwood tree over here, and suddenly you find a seashell at your feet, and you're just wondering, where am I? It's absolutely, again, amazing place. But that soil is really important. Soil is always important for grape growing. It drives a flavor and a character in a wine. But as important as the soil up on top, what we call topsoil, the first, sometimes only 2 feet up to 6 feet of soil on top, you always have a layer underneath. And up here, that layer underneath is solid, usually about 120 to 140 million year old volcanic rock. So that subsoil is very kind of granite based and very different from what we have in the Russian River. The Russian River is a clay based subsoil. And why am I boring you again with geology? Well, it's important because that rocky subsoil actually drives what this wine has, both in the Chardonnay and the Pinot Noir, that structure, that tannin. So it's not just the soil at the very top where the roots spend most of their time, but that subsoil actually builds character into the wine. And that's one of the things I love about this wine, because it balances this incredible lightness while it has this incredible power at the same time. So what do you guys think? Let's hear you talk, because I've been rambling here. What do you guys think of the Chardonnay? Do you find some of the same characters I'm talking about, or what are the descriptors you guys have? Or questions?
Well, I'm actually drinking the Russian River Valley Chardonnay.
Well, there you go. That's a pretty good one too.
It is excellent, and I'm definitely getting an apple, almost like a golden apple taste to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and the beauty of the Russian River, it's sourced from about 13 different vineyards, and all of our single vineyard sites we have Chardonnay on are blended together here with a couple outside grower vineyards. And so you get areas that give you a lot of that apple character, other areas that are really citrus driven, others that give you more tropical notes. And so that one is.
It's interesting because you started talking about this area and you said this used to be an old apple orchard. As I'm sipping this wine and tasting apple, I'm thinking, no, the two can't be connected. There's no way that apples having been grown on the property would affect the taste of wine, would it?
No, we wish, because that would even make the wines even better. But no, it's interesting. Chardonnay does really mirror a lot of fruit flavors, as does Pinot Noir, where you see things like apple, and you literally are getting the same compounds in the finished wines that give an apple its flavor. They're the same compounds. They're different esters on the aromatic side that are compounds that smell like certain fruits, and they're exactly the same as what you get out of an apple. But the only time your site will really influence a crop that's planted there is if you have a eucalyptus tree, or even bay trees right next to your vineyard. The oil from a eucalyptus tree actually go from the tree into the air and get into the grape. And if any of you have ever had a glass of Martha's Vineyard Cabernet from Heights, you can smell that kind of big wintergreen kind of character, and that's a signature of that wine. But because what was there, it's all about what flavors are there because of the way the wine ferments.
When you bring in barrels, is there the preparation of those barrels to be used different for a Chardonnay versus a Pinot Noir?
Preparation of the new barrels when they come in isn't different typically, but they can be very different barrels. They might be the same cooperage, the same barrel maker, but they might be from a different area in France, or a different tightness of grain. So that's where the differences come in. We tend to use barrels that have a little more tannin and even tighter grain with Pinot Noir than we would with Chardonnay. But we don't get into wide grain, open grain barrels with Chardonnay, because that's when you get into those really vanilla kind of cotton candy, what we call lactose as well. A good bourbon, that's vanilla. To me, that's lactone. We don't want lactone. I love bourbon, but I don't want Chardonnay to taste like bourbon. So yeah, and this wine, just for reference, is only about 30% new French oak. So it's about a third new, a third 1-year-old, and a third 2-year-old barrel in most cases. So we're using some older barrels as well as the brand new barrels.
So how does that work? You put it in for a little while, and then in the French oak, and then you move it to a different barrel, and then you move it to a different barrel?
Now the wines all spend their entire life in the same barrel until we put our final blend together. So if we pick grapes, let's say we pick grapes at 1 a.m. up there and truck the fruit down, it gets here about 5 or 6 in the morning, 7 o'clock at the winery. We put it in the press, and let's say we get 600 gallons of juice out of that. The 600 gallons is going to go into about 13 barrels, let's say. Of those 13, we'd probably put 3 new barrels, brand new, 3 1-year-old barrels, and 3 or 4 2-year-old barrels in there, and then fill a couple more older barrels, because when we barrel ferment, we can't fill the barrel all the way. So we're going to have a few more barrels to start with, then we're going to consolidate back. But we're going to start out with a mix of the same juice going into some new barrels, into some 1-year-old, and some 2-year-old. Season goes on, we go out, Tion and I go out, and we taste every barrel out there, and we look at the different barrels and decide, which barrels are going to play best together. And it's not always just your favorite barrel that comes out as, the best wine, but it's how the different wines in each barrel blend together. So there's a lot of detail blending that goes into this on a very small scale. And these wines, the Far Coast, that's about 12 barrels, 13 barrels maybe in total when we bottled the wine. So it has a mix right from the beginning, and we don't move our wines around a lot. They're all native fermented. all fermented in French oak. We don't do any filtration or any fining on any of our wines. So literally what you see in your glass is what comes out of the barrel on the day we're going to bottle. So very hands-off style of winemaking. And we could spend an entire hour talking about winemaking, but I won't bore you with all the details. Suffice it to say is our approach is to let the vineyard show through. And that's why we spend so much time talking about these vineyards, visiting them, planting in places like this that are out in the middle of nowhere, but really give us special wines.
Do you have a favorite among all your wines?
Yeah, let's see. What wine are we selling today? No, I'm kidding. It's hard to have a favorite because for me, wine's something that the wine I want to drink in this moment is very different from what I may want to drink tomorrow. And depending on who you're with, what you're eating, what mood you're in, literally what kind of food you had. So for Chardonnay, some days I just want the intensity of Far Coast. Other days I want like the just minerality and the kind of craziness that you get from our Stonecoat Chardonnay. And other days I want Jennifer's, which has this just amazing high acid and grip and a really different flavor profile. So for me, it's hard to pin one favorite because I not to pat ourselves on the back, but I think, if a wine goes in a bottle and we put this label on it that says Hartford Court, we think it's pretty damn special, and we will never ever put anything in the bottle that we question ourselves as winemakers or as our owner. And that's one of the great things about being here. I have owners in Don and Jenny and their kids Haley and McLean who literally they care as much or more about the wines, which is rare. Usually winemakers absolutely are the last, they're just staunch about making the best wine, even if it's only one barrel of wine. But they're completely supportive and on board with us. There are years where we don't bottle a wine because we don't think it lives up to the standards because of weather, the vintage, whatever. And it's perfectly good wine. It tastes great, but for us, maybe it's not as good as it usually is. And it may be just a notch down, but that's not good enough. So we're very picky when it comes to things like that.
Hey, Jeff, there's some questions in the chat room. You want me to throw a few at you?
Yeah, I actually don't have the chat open. So yeah, what do we got out there?
Let's see. One question was, what was the first vintage of the Far Coast Pinot and Chardonnay?
First vintage of Far Coast Chardonnay was 2009. So we planted the vineyard back in 96, 97. And believe it or not, we didn't make a wine as a single vineyard out there until that year. And why is that? Well, one of the big things for us is we like vine maturity. We like to see a vineyard kind of find its happy place. And you get fruit after 3 or 4 years in a vineyard site typically, and you can make good wine in those years. But honestly, those younger vines never made the compelling wine that we're tasting today. And it wasn't until those vineyards, about 10 years in the ground, 11 years, that we went, okay, look who showed up to the party finally. So we waited a little longer. The Far Coast Pinot Noir, I want to say was, '05. I'd have to look, to be honest. I can't remember. We have so many wines, it's actually hard to keep track.
Was it 07? No.
Maybe it was 07. It's either 05 or 07. It might have been 07 because I think Land's Edge we made in 05.
Okay.
But it was a little earlier than the Chardonnay because we found the Pinot sort of developed a little more quickly, and we found, for us, it's also a big part of this is finding out what the vineyard really is. We have to understand the vineyard and see what kind of wine, this sounds silly, but what kind of wine does the vineyard want to be? And sometimes you have to kind of tweak your winemaking and barrel choices to really fine tune and find how to best kind of express that vineyard site. So, but
prior to using it as a single
are
vineyard,
a little over 20 years old, and they're right in their prime wheelhouse for the next 20 plus years, we hope. So really fun.
Prior to using those grapes as a single vineyard wine, were you using them in blends, or were you selling the juice, or what were you?
Yeah,
doing
we
with
would
the grapes?
sell it off. Years ago, Hartford for a couple of years made a little Sonoma Coast blend that had several vineyards. It had some Bohan, which is a grower out on the coast, some Martinelli, and there was a few years we made a little Sonoma Coast blend, but that went away. And then we came back finally and bottled this. So yeah, there are years where we'll make wines that they're like R&D. I mean, we're like somebody doing research and development and knowing we're not going to bottle the wine, we're going to go sell it off in the end, just to learn about it and really feel again like you understand it and know what it wants to be when it grows up.
I'm going to throw out a couple more of the questions about the Far Coast. There's some questions about, the vintage or bringing wines in. Have we started harvest, smoke tank? But I'm gonna throw out a couple of the Far Coast vineyard questions, which is, we love the finish on this Far Coast Chardonnay. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, so the finish is kind of part of that. I kind of talked about that structure and tannin and grip. So to me, it's really fruit driven up front. So you get the kind of the apple citrus, you get bright acidity, that broad tannin. It sort of coats your tongue. It's almost like a velvety kind of texture thing that kind of coats your mouth. And then after you've had that richness, you sort of get it's almost in line with what we get out of a couple of the vineyards in the Russian River. And that's probably as much of anything as the soil type, the Goldridge soil is driving that. And it's sort of this crisp, and it's almost like crystallized ginger. So it has almost a little mouth-watering kind of bite to it. And it's not bitter. It's not unappealing, but it's sort of mouth-watering. And I always see that kind of blended. It's acid and that crystallized ginger, or even quinine, and then another layer of fruit that's more, for me in this vintage, more like pear, and that's what I get in the back end of the finish. So I don't know what you're tasting, and everybody sees things very differently. So just because I say pears and you taste guava doesn't mean that you're wrong. It means we all taste differently and like to express things differently.
Yeah.
Pretty good stuff, I think.
What's the ageability of these wines?
Well, what do you guys think? Who likes it right now? I do.
I like a fresh one, but
I think it tastes great right now. I think this is right. I mean, the 17 vintage is just starting to really open up. But I also think this is a wine that will age 10, 15, up to 20 years in a good vintage without any problem. The beauty of what we have here is really where we have this great combination of bright acidity, low pH out there because of the cooler climate. We treat the wine in a way where it doesn't get tired in the winery. We're very gentle with everything. We don't move the wine around a lot. We don't do a bunch of rackings to open up the wine and make it fruit driven. I want the wine to open up in your glass, and I guarantee if you pour a glass of, whether it's Russian River or the Far Coast, pour a glass, taste it, enjoy it, come back an hour later, that same glass, and you'll see a whole nother realm of flavors that are opening up. And that's sort of what happens when you age wines. Different characters come out. Now, if you like really bright, racy fruit and acid like this one has right now, drink it now. If you like a little more developed character, you want to see the fruit kind of molded in more, play it down 5 years, 6 years. What I always tell people is, when you love a wine, buy a case of it, pop a bottle every year, write down your notes on it, and see when the goal point is. And then kind of where your favorite spot is. Because for some people it's 1 year, some it's 5 years, some it's 10 years. But yeah, it definitely has ageability. Other chat questions?
13.5. Hey, Robert, Houston, Texas here.
How we doing, Robert? Do you have a question?
Can you speak to the lemon zest that's coming through on this Chardonnay?
Yeah, lemon zest. That's a good one. I didn't really talk about that, but that's again something. It's kind of that lemon rind, lemon oil kind of thing that comes through. There's an oiliness to this wine, and again, that's just. These aren't flavors we're adding. Obviously, these are things that are just occurring naturally from the compounds that are in the grapes as juice, and the fermentation process will convert some of those into these different flavors. But this wine always has a bit of that oily character. It also, there are 3 clones or selections of Chardonnay planted in that little block. There's clone 15, which is a majority of the fruit that goes into this wine. And clone 15 is actually originally, we think, an Italian kind of clone of Chardonnay that originally came out of Burgundy, but ended up being sort of propagated out in Italy and isolated as sort of something unique. And then the University of Washington, or actually no, it's Washington State, excuse me, brought some of that clone over and started calling that clone 15. And it's the mineral structure kind of piece of this wine. There's some Dijon 96 in here as well. And that tends to be a little more of the steely side. A little bit of that lemon pith comes from that as well. And then we have a selection called 809, which gives you a little bit of more of that oily character and also has a little subtle kind of almost honeysuckle floral note to it. So there's a small percentage of that in there because that can be very overbearing. But we're blending the 3 clones together there, and they each, again, give you a little different flavor profile. And they all bring something to the party. But yeah, that oiliness is mostly from that little bit of 809. So good.
Okay. And can I ask a second question? Did you earlier refer to this Chard as picking up senses of Pinot? Did you say that earlier?
Yeah, I said it more in the sense that this wine kind of has almost like the structure and texture of a Pinot Noir. Now we don't.
I did pick it up. That's why I'm asking. I did pick it up. Others in the room here, and you said, "No, you didn't." But I said, "Yeah, I did. I understood."
Yeah, you did. Sure, you did. Yeah, and again, we're not fermenting. We're not fermenting on the skins like we would with Pinot Noir. Although we do a whole cluster fermentation on this vineyard every year. And sometimes there may be 20, 30 gallons of that wine that goes into this for a little structural side, but it's pretty interesting, just a little experiment we like to do. But yeah, these are really, while they have a little bit of that red wine character, they're made exactly like all of our other Chardonnays. But yeah, it's, again, one of the defining characters here, kind of that structure. So,
What's the most mineral of your Chardonnays?
people argue about that. I think a lot of people would say Stonecoat. Others would say Four Hearts, and others would say Far Coast sometimes, and even Seascape, the other Sonoma Coast vineyard. So, mineral is a very broad term. I use it and I dislike it at the same time because it's a very general, vague term, but it's something that's definitely there. We know that you don't pick up minerals from the soil into juice that ends up in a wine. There's just no physical, chemical way for that to happen. And yet we know that vineyards on certain soil types and in certain places just have that. If you drink Grand Cru Chablis, you know what I'm talking about. If you drink wines like these or some other California wines that have that character, it's there, and we can't deny that. The phrase, the verbiage can mean a lot of different things to different people. But I think Stonecoat has just a ton of that mineral sort of character to it, and that's way down, pretty far away from Far Coast when we look at the map. Stonecoat is all the way down here. There's the Russian River. Stonecoat all the way down here in the southern part of Sonoma Valley. So just how far apart those are, but they have a similar character to them. So, anyways, we don't want to move on to Pinot Noir and talk about that quickly. Then you can answer a few more questions. So the Pinot Noir comes from, again, the same vineyard site here. And it is, I'm going to try and get this sort of flattened out a little. There we go. Zoom in a little more. So whereas the Chardonnay was all the way up here on the hill, the Pinot Noir for Far Coast comes from a little ridge that runs right along here. So a tiny amount of this block, and this is the high spot. This little road right here is the high point of this kind of little ridge. Everything drops off to the right here and then drops off again to the left. So it's sort of a beautiful kind of southeast facing slope. So that means it gets morning sun, but out there the fog is in on most mornings. So there's not a lot of sun in the morning. So a big chunk of the sunlight happens in the afternoon. And being on this downhill slope, it's a little bit more protected. So it ripens a little bit later on this little ridge, whereas on this side, it ripens a little bit earlier. More sunlight on the fruit here gives you a little softer tannin. Less sunlight on the fruit in the afternoon gives you a little more structure. So the Far Coast wine is, I'm kind of leading you into what I think of it, but the Far Coast is probably one of the biggest, most structured Pinot Noirs that we make. And again, it's not Cabernet, it's not a Merlot, it's not, big, dry your mouth out tannins, but it's a big, powerful wine. And again, that's because of just the specific little microclimates within this vineyard site itself. You make very different wines from here and here. So again, we have a little section here of one clone and then 3 different clones split across these little blocks here. Some old Mard here that makes a really lush kind of rich wine. That will always go into the blend. 667 Dijon clone here in these 2 blocks and a little 777 in here. And each of those, again, brings a little different character to the party. And again, we have the same Gold Ridge soil on top of that old Franciscan granite-based volcanic rock. And the structure from that rock, I think, really shows up in this wine. But one of the things that defines this wine for me is something that's not a fruit aromatic or flavor, nor is it the tannin structural piece. It's actually mocha. So this is mocha is something that a lot of times in a wine you'll get the mocha sort of character from barrels, because they can give you sort of this chocolatey coffee thing that's really interesting. Barrels can give off components like that. The interesting thing about Far Coast Pinot Noir is literally when the wines are fermenting out in the tank before they, you stick your nose down in there and you wave aromatics up from the fermentation headspace and you smell milk. So it's something inherent to the vineyard. It's really, but there's a ton of fruit to this as well. You need darker, bigger fruits. So blackberries, black cherries, raspberries as well, but definitely a big, lots of fruit.
So we picked up our wine this afternoon from UPS and opened it up. It seems to be slow in opening up. Does that surprise you?
Yeah, I usually like to, if possible, if wine ships, give it a few days to settle down. But I think if you swirl it around, let it kind of open up in the glass, give it 20 minutes, I bet it'll open up. But yeah, that's one of the things about shipping wine. And I know we've some of this was a little bit tight trying to get wine out to people. And
you can tell Paul that we did get our wine in time.
Well, that's good. That's good. That's always our goal, but sometimes it's harder.
With 2 hours to spare.
Next time we'll give everybody a little more warning on this and plan a little further out. But to be honest, we scheduled this day because I figured by next week I wouldn't have the time to actually sit down for an hour and talk about wine. We would be out making wine and running around like crazy on the crush pads.
The point wasn't to take a shot. My point was to try to understand, because it just seems like that it needs to open up some more to really be where it needs to be, I think.
The Chardonnay was excellent.
Okay, good.
But
I usually let my ship wine sit a couple weeks before I open it.
Yeah,
we normally do too, but
we got it after 4 o'clock this afternoon.
Yeah.
Well, and you were excited. You had to open it. So
Oh, yeah, well, we
don't
did it
worry.
for the-
We made
Well,
more,
we'll
so
try
you
to-
get more. It's all
We
good.
made-
So I probably just want to get into questions now because I used up a lot of time talking about Chardonnay. So what's interesting on the Pinot Noir side for you guys, or what things did I confuse you with, or make
Well,
you...
I opened up a Muldoon Trail, so I'm not in with the group here as far as what you're drinking.
Okay, well, we'll take you up to Muldoon Trail. You're actually going even further north. Look at this. There you are up on this ridge top. You're up at 2,000 foot elevation. We're feet back there, so you're living high on the hog.
Pretty close to the ocean again.
Yeah, again, you're not as close as you are back at Far Coast. This is about 6 miles to Velvet Sisters, so you can say this is a little bit further straight in. You're about, it's about, I think, 11 miles as the crow flies, but really most of the cold air comes in this direction. But this vineyard, what drives its character is being up at 2,000 feet, really cool nights and really warm days. The fog burns off up there early, but it's really cold up there at night. So you get, it's similar in style to Far Coast in the sense that it's one of the bigger Pinot Noirs we make. You can see.
I opened in 2014, and I'm getting. I've let it sit here for a while. I'm getting some almost chocolatey or mocha type
Yeah.
flavor in it. The flavor.
That's a 17. Hey,
Yeah,
Jeff,
so
you
another
said-
great vineyard, and then Velvet Sisters is our other Anderson Valley bottling. And those are the two wines that
It's very nice.
worlds apart, even though they're in the same AVA, because this is in the coldest part of the Anderson Valley, down at about 200 foot elevation, and this one is 2,000 foot.
1,000, yeah, makes a big difference.
Yeah, really interesting. And you can see kind of they're about the same distance apart as we are from the Russian River to Far Coast. So we even now, to give you a sense, we even go all the way up here. Look at that. Warrior Princess, for those of you who have had
I have some of that.
all the way up there in the Willamette Valley. So, unfortunately, this year with COVID, I have not been to see our vineyard, but I've had FaceTime with our vineyard manager walking through the blocks and talking about what things look like, but it's not the same as being there. But hopefully we'll get up there soon. Anyways.
Hey, Jeff Houston, another question.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the 17. We have the 17 in the room. We also have a 15 Far Coast in the room. So an interesting comparison there. And then we have an Arundel in the room as well. So we've got a real nice setup here tonight.
What's your address? What time should I be there? That sounds way better than
You should.
We have a lot more than lockers.
Both wines are singing. I agree with the earlier comment. The 17's not there yet, but my gosh, it'll come through. The 15 tells us it will come through in spades.
Yeah, and that's kind of the patience that you have to have sometimes, because if you just drink the 17 on its own, you go, wow, that's a really nice wine. But when you look at something with a couple years on it and how it starts developing and opening up and really evolving, then it's like, oh, I gotta wait. But that patience piece is hard. I know I have that problem at my house. But
It's working.
15 was still in the drought, so those are pretty concentrated wines. 17 was the first year where we came out of the drought. We got a lot of rain that year. And again, another vintage we'll never forget, 17 with unfortunately big forest fires here that came through Santa Rosa. So I don't know.
Are you back in a drought this year, or you have plenty of rain?
Yeah, it's not. I wouldn't say we're in a drought, but we had a lighter rain year than we would have liked. We had good rainfall in December and a little bit in January, and then it just really disappeared. And fortunately, ski season went away for us, and I didn't get to go skiing as much as I would have liked. But we got a little bit of rain in May, and that was the last rain we saw until about a week ago. So
it toughens up the roots.
Well, it toughens up the vines, that's for sure. And we dry farm a lot of vineyards out here, so one year isn't a big deal, but a second year, third year, fourth year, that starts to take a little bit of toll because these vines do
like to show how much I know.
I saw the big pond you have at Far Coast. So is that for watering, or is that?
It is, and it's really there. It's really there so we can develop the vineyard and get the young vines going, and then we'll use it like we're in the middle of a heat wave here. So what's today? Today's Wednesday. Last Thursday, we put some water on at vineyard to kind of brace it against the heat so we didn't have dehydration. So we use the water to balance out the vineyard and not let
way too much invested to lose it.
Yeah, exactly. So
with the Far Coast Pinot and Chard, what kind of food pairings would you recommend given the tannin structures of both wines?
Yeah, I think both are pretty versatile. I mean, the Chardonnay probably even more versatile than a lot of Chardonnay because it has acidity. So, you can just put it with something that you can put it up like with cream sauce and pasta, that richness, and it'll cut right through that because of the acidity. But it's also something I love pairing up with protein. So even, the obvious things would be shrimp and lobster where you maybe with drawn butter because you have a lot of intensity here and you have the acidity to kind of balance that out. But I think you can even go, I love this wine with things like, a pork loin or, even, it's a little weird, but I normally lamb, I go straight to Pinot Noir. But this wine actually with a really flavorful and well-prepared kind of little lamb riblet, it works really well because, there's just that inherent fattiness in lamb. And again, the crispness of this wine balances that, but it also has the tannin structure, that grip to kind of stand up to it. So it's kind of, you find different things. I love this with salads. We'll do this with we do dinner pairings. You can pair this up with like, a salad that has like a lot of walnuts or toasted pine nuts in it, like that. So I think versatility is really the beauty of that wine. You can do a lot of things with it. With the Far Coast Pinot, again, I think it, almost we'll go with salmon, we'll go with lamb, we'll go with pork, we'll go with duck. But I tend with this wine to lean more towards bigger proteins, a ribeye, a New York. It's a Pinot Noir that can stand big, powerful flavors and big, like a ribeye, or if you get a dry age, it works. It's like a Cabernet that has some age on it right out of the gate. Those are some of my favorites. But
Thank you. That is
basic rule is we all think about food and wine pairings way too much, and I think if you have really good wine and really good food, whatever it is, they usually work pretty well together. So, box yourselves in, be creative, adventurous sometimes. So, other questions? Chat questions out there?
Yeah. How are the 18s looking?
How are the 18s looking? Really, really nice. We just finished blending all the 18 single vineyard wines in the last month and got those back into barrels. So that's the one movement those wines see where we pick out the individual barrels that are going to come together. And they went back to barrel, and we'll put them to sleep for harvest here and, put them in the corner and let them kind of take that final little walk down the maturity road, and we'll bottle Chardonnays in December and Pinot Noirs in early February. But nice vintage, I think the 17s are definitely show power. I think the 18s show maybe a touch more finesse, but they're still powerful wines and really nice kind of balanced acids. And I think they'll be wines that really show well right out of the gate and still have great ageability. So we're pretty excited about the 18s, pretty balanced yields. And we put the first of the 18s in bottle, and those are the Far Coast and the Four Hearts Chardonnay and Land's Edge Pinot is in the bottle now. That's not released yet, but the Four Hearts Chardonnay is a beautiful example of kind of where I think the 18 vintage is going. We always release that wine a little earlier than the single vineyard wines. So we're pretty happy.
I'd like to pick your brain on whole berry fermentation while we got you, and toasting and stems. So what's your approach?
Yeah, so a lot of wine, I mean, whole cluster, stem inclusion, involving the stem with the fermentation with Pinot Noir is very much a trendy, and I don't mean trendy in a bad way, but it's become really popular in the last 5-10 years, and it's a great tool. You can make wines that have additional layers of flavor and character. But for me, whole cluster tends to do something as well that it sort of drives the wines. If you make 15 or 17 Pinot Noirs like we do, and you do 40% whole cluster on everything, that's a character that brings all of those wines more in the same direction than focusing on the differences in them. And I love what whole clusters give you, which aromatically can be a lot of spice and beautiful aromatic character. It can add tannin into vineyards that maybe have a little less tannin. So it's a really great tool, and I love it. But I don't use a lot of whole cluster on most of our wines because, again, that reason I don't want to kind of drive the wines in the same direction. Where we do use whole cluster in vineyards are in vineyards where the whole cluster character, in my mind, accentuates the character of the wine and brings out the character of the style. So McLean's Block is a great example. McLean's Block down here in Green Valley, up here on a little hillside, about 500-foot elevation at the top here, and this is a slope that goes down. And our two blocks are this little block right here and this little block and this little section here. And as you can see, this is all surrounded by a forest, and the entire block is surrounded. Unlike Far Coast, it was a little more open. So we get almost a piney sort of earthy character that comes out, again, because of that native surrounding forest. The whole cluster fermentation there accentuates the spice of that kind of pine sap and the structure of this wine. So it works really well there, and it's, to me, part of the wine. Whereas if we do a lot of whole cluster, with Fog Dance, which is right over here, this is a much more delicate wine, much more red fruits. This is low-lying. Green Valley Creek runs right through here and ends up right in front of our winery, actually. But this area tends to produce that spicy, really aromatic, delicate style of Pinot Noir. The cluster there would mask that for me. So I love it, but I also think it needs to be used really judiciously. And I have very good friends, good winemaker friends, both good friends and good winemakers that use exclusively whole cluster on everything. And there's nothing wrong with it. I just think it makes all the wines more similar. If you make one wine, great tool. So does that kind of make sense?
Sure. And toasting, how do you feel about barrel toast?
Barrel toasting is also a very important thing because, again, we're buying barrels from France of specific grain tightnesses for different wines and different forests that give you different characteristics. Most of our toasting regimes that the coopers use are on the lighter side, so we're not going for a big charred character. I don't think you'll see a lot of char in any of the wines or any of that big chocolatey kind of side that you get when you go to a really more heavily toasted barrel. Again, we're relying on maintaining some of the tannin in that barrel to interact with the tannins in the wine and form more complex tannins that are longer chains, that are more stable over time and give you more. It's a weird case where you add the grape tannin and the wine tannin to get grape tannin and the barrel tannin together. It's more tannin when you put them together, but it's actually softer and more rich in the end because they're complex tannins that hold together longer. So, I used to use a lot of medium plus barrels, and now we use more medium minus than medium plus, and even some light toast barrels depending on the cooper. So, and we
Toast can cover.
change
Toast
and
can
things
cover.
change.
I apologize. I was just going to say toast can cover up an awful multitude of sins.
Well, and that barrels can as well, and that's again, my favorite saying about our wines is, if we're sitting across from each other, whether it's at a table having dinner together or over a Zoom meeting like this, and you look at me and say, wow, that Fog Dance Chardonnay sure does have great oak on it. I love that oak. I failed because we spent so much time out in this vineyard picking out the little sections that we're going to farm just for Hartford, and we're going to do everything in our power to make it the best possible wine. This little section right here, we're literally going to pick. The row starts up here and goes all the way to the bottom. We're going to pick to right here and actually cut across and just pick this little section first. Pick this about a week later, because it's worth separating this out because it's different and a little better than the stuff at the bottom. So if I spend all that time and then I go throw all this brand new vanilla-laden, charry, chocolatey oak at it and you can't smell anything that this vineyard gave you, why? Go farm some crappy vineyards, save yourself a lot of money on land costs and farming, and just make oak juice. And again, nothing wrong with that, but that's not what we do. We don't think it's a good idea. So
Keep doing what you're doing.
well, thank you. We will try. You guys are keeping us in this business, so we have to thank you for that. So
You make it somewhat easy.
somewhat easy. We like that. Somewhat easy.
Well,
Somewhat easy.
spending money is always but you make spending money somewhat easy. Let me put it that way.
Well, and you know what? You might as well enjoy it. That's the way I look at it.
Absolutely.
I think we all love great wine, and there's days where you're going to drink really special wines, and there's other days where maybe you're going to spend a little less and maybe not splurge as much, but sometimes those wines are every bit as good as the most expensive wine you ever drink.
But they all create an experience.
Comes back,
and
it always seems to come back to
what's
that.
awesome.
That expensive wine always blows your mind away, and you always want to come back to it. But that's
Hey, Jeff, quick question. Could you maybe compare and contrast the Far Coast with a couple of your other Pinots, just to give us a sense of the range and what's different from each one?
Yeah, I mean, the best example, and then probably two of the most different Pinot Noirs are the Far Coast we've been talking about, and Seascape. Again, the two Sonoma Coast wines. If you buy into the idea of how many miles you are from the ocean and elevation, they're very similar, but they're very, very different wines. For those of you who have tasted both Far Coast and Seascape, especially side by side. Far Coast, big, powerful, dark fruits, tannin, structure, still elegant but big. Seascape, much more elegant and savory. Seascape has beautiful red fruit aromatics, and it also has this kind of, we call it almost like a single malt Islay Scotch, like Lagavulin or Lafroy, where you get this sort of smoked peat sort of that, again, isn't a barrel component, it's a vineyard component. You just smell it in the grapes. It's amazing. Very delicate and light on its feet, but very concentrated at the same time. So they really, if I were to line up all 15 or 17 Pinot Noirs in a row, and the way we would line those up is sort of building an intensity of tannin, and you want to start with sort of your most delicate, elegant wines. Seascape is going to be in the first couple wines in that flight, and Far Coast is going to be in the last couple wines in that flight. So very, very, very different. If you go to Rendell, we have a Rendell on the table out there as well. A Rendell, our oldest Pinot Noir vineyard, just crazy intense, like Kirsch, just like this cherry liqueur, intensity, very low tannin, but again, really, really concentrated. And that's driven by the fact that it's really low lying here, very cold in the very coldest part of Green Valley. An older plant selection here, planted in 75, fine maturity, all those things add up. If you go to Fog Dance up here, Fog Dance, again, on the Pinot Noir side, all that red fruit, less of that kind of cherry liqueur that you get at Arundel and more of kind of a spicy, exotic cherry fruit. And then blood orange, you get almost a citric character there. Go down to Jennifer's, all the way down in the southern part of the AVA, all the way down here. Oldest part of the Russian River here. So this ripens about 3 weeks later than Fog Dance. And out here, you're getting this really crazy combination of almost some of the seascape character, the kind of exotic side, but this intensity of fruit that isn't like the cherries of Fog Dance. It isn't like the darker fruits that you see at McLean's. It's sort of this kind of combination. And you start rolling all those secondary and tertiary elements. Those are the things that define these wines as much as the kind of the fruit profile for me. But again, with that cooler climate, they have higher acidity, and there's a brightness and a tautness to the wines, but still really intense. So, I mean, that's a few of them. We could keep going, but the best.
I'll tell you, Jeff.
Talking about them is less fun than drinking them. So.
Great. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
Let me just add that one of these times we should talk about your Zinfandel.
Well, you know what? If you guys enjoy this,
it's really good.
Something, I've been doing this for a lot of restaurants and a lot of different people around the country, and we hadn't really done one with people on our mailing list. And Becky and I were sitting there one day, like, we need to do that. We're doing that more because a lot of you come and visit us on a regular basis and get out here to the winery, and now we obviously know that's a lot more difficult than it used to be. So we know we need to come visit you in whatever way we can. So,
in Wisconsin, we love your Zins.
Well,
we'll definitely schedule more of these. I think if people want them, we can do them. Jeff loves to do them, is doing them all the time anyways. So, and if we didn't get to your question, we will definitely get the answers out to you. We'll email them to you. So I know we missed a few, but I know we can't keep Jeff much longer because we are under an evacuation advisory, and he needs to close up the winery in case things change before nightfall. So
be safe. Be safe.
Be safe. Good luck.
Be safe. Good luck.
We're thinking of
Good luck with that.
Thanks. Be safe.
Thank you, everyone. Really great to have you all on today, and you guys have a great evening and keep drinking great wine.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Cheers.
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 Once again, looking for the Zin tasting.
We'll do it.
That'll be next.
It's on the list.
Awesome.
You guys be safe.
Hopefully all the questions will record and I can get answers from you tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll go through the chat and do
Perfect.
Exactly what he was talking
And,
about.
and we're on the East Coast, and we got our wines in time. Thank you, Paul.
Oh, wonderful.
There you go,
So
Paul.
glad.
Glad to hear that. Got our wines on time also.
That's what we like to do. Get the wine on time.
That's the key.
Love to have a vertical tasting too, if you could put that together.
We can do that. Yeah.
We're working.
That's a good idea too. We'll take ideas. Send us ideas. We're totally open.
Yeah, send us emails. info@hartfordwines.com.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great job, Jeff. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You guys have a great night.
Yep, the 2016 Arundel we're drinking tonight was spectacular.
That's
Well,
awesome. Look at that lineup. I love it.
Savor that one and enjoy it. Oh, yeah, I'm jealous.
We have about 8 more vineyards to pick from tonight too. We're just in our lockers.
You guys are so nice of you guys to do this tonight, especially in light of what you faced there.
Well, we didn't know this was going to happen a few weeks ago when we scheduled this, but hey, honestly, it was kind of good to get away from it for an hour. And
Think about
yeah. Well, from Houston, Dennis here. Good night, guys. Thank you very much for a very entertaining.
Absolutely.
Several Texans on there.
All right. Good night, everybody. I'm going to end it or we'll never get off.
We're gonna go have our 2013 Old Vine Zen for dessert.
Yes.
Ooh, yummy. I like it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Send emails with your favorite wines and pairings of the night, and we'll try and incorporate those into something in the future. How's that?
That is great.
All right.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
All right.
Y'all
Take
be
care,
safe.
you guys. Bye-bye.